Hello and welcome, fellow RC enthusiasts. This is your host, Tom Cogswell from Horizon Hobby and SpektrumRC, here to give you a quick overview of each of the 6 Avian Smart ESCs, or Smart Speed Controls. Avian, as the name would imply, is for airplane or aircraft models. That also includes helicopters, if you were wondering. So we're going to do a quick unboxing and overview of each of the 6 Avian ESCs, from the 15 amp all the way up to the 100 amp that are available right now. And during the unboxing, you'll see what comes in the box, and I'll give you some tidbits on what the ESC is great for and what the other little accoutrements on the ESC imply and what they're used for. So go ahead and follow along while I jump you down to the bench and unbox each of these ESCs and get you more familiar with our Spektrum Avian Smart ESCs. Hello friends, these are my hands, welcome back. We are gonna go ahead and unbox, or rather unpackage, the first out of the Avian Smart ESCs. We're gonna unbox the 15 amp. This guy right here. So the 15 amp, it does come in this plastic packaging. It is actually not too bad, I like it a lot. The 15 amp is a great ESC for your flat foamies or your tiny little park flyers, something that's gonna run like a 250 size motor. It's great for your park size flyers, your little flat foamies, your little indoor planes and things like that. The 15 amp is actually the only Smart ESC, at least currently, that does not support the battery telemetry. So it's not going to feed battery telemetry back to your ESC. A bit of a letdown, but you'll still get your Avian, your ESC data from your Spektrum Smart ESC to your radio transmitter. So you'll get voltage and RPM and current, all of that good stuff from your Avian ESC, your 15 amp that we're unboxing or unpackaging here. So let's take a quick look at what is inside of the packaging. Obviously, we have some stickers. There are 2 different sets, ones that are a little bit bigger, and then some that say Avian on there. That's all well and good. It comes with an ESC programming manual that is in a number of different languages. Looks like 5 different languages. No, 4 different languages. And here is the ESC. So the ESC has 2mm bullet connectors on it, as you might be able to see there. You don't have to use those, obviously. I like to cut them off and solder them myself. It has a IC3 plug on it. Once again, this one, as you can tell here, doesn't have the little middle wire because this ESC doesn't have the hardware to transmit the battery data to your receiver and likewise to your radio. That's not a big deal in my opinion with these little guys. I love using these in flat foamies myself. Like the Jace Ducia JTA Game Bird. I'm actually putting one together with this same ESC in there, and I'm going to do a video on that in the near future because it is winter here at this time and it's indoor season. So it's always a good time to put together your little flat foamies or your little things that you want to practice F3A flying on the indoor 3D good stuff. And so here we go. This one actually has 2 leads coming off of it. What are these 2 leads for? Well, obviously this one is our signal lead. We have signal, ground, and power, okay? But this one is an RPM lead or a programming lead. So if you are going to program this ESC using the Spektrum Smart programming box, this ESC programming box, you will have to plug it in, the programming lead, into where it says ESC, and you will have to power this either through a battery, so it's got a little battery port, or what I like to do when I'm programming these ESCs is I plug in this one into that port, the ESC port, and then I plug in this one into the BAT port, like so, and then I power the ESC with the battery. This will pop up and you'll be able to program it with it. Stay tuned for our next video where we're going to be using this to program this ESC, and I'll give you guys a more in-depth run through on how that's used. But just a quick, if you guys are watching this video and you're curious what that other lead is for, that's what it's for. All right, that is it for the Avian 15 amp ESC. Next up, we're gonna talk about these 2 ESCs, because they're both pretty much the same thing, just a different amperage rating. The 30 amp and the 45 amp. The 30 amp is a great ESC for 1 meter planes, usually running like a 450 size motor, something that's obviously going to be pulling around 30 amps. It does handle a burst current of 45 amps and it's 3 to 6S compatible. The 45 amp is just a little bit beefier than this one. It can also handle 3 to 6S and it has a 60 amp peak burst current, but 45 amps continuous. This one would be a great upgrade for like your T28s, like the Park Zone T28 or the e-flite T28, different models like that. So if you have a model that already has a 30 amp ESC and you're looking to put Smart into it, that's probably a great option for that. The other one, the 45 amp, is obviously a little bit bigger, and if you were looking to put it into, let's say, like a timber, that would probably be a good option for that, or maybe the larger T28. This is actually a really good ESC. So I personally would run it in something that's running like a 4S setup, and then this one I would probably gear towards the 3S setups. Just kind of a rule of thumb there. You guys can experiment with it. One of the great things about Avian ESCs is that they tell you the current draw and the temperature of the ESC while you're running it, when you're running it with a compatible setup, so you can gauge and dictate whether or not this is the right ESC for that setup. Or you can play around with prop sizes and motor sizes and whatnot to get the ESC to be running as effectively and efficiently as possible. Let's go ahead and open up the 45 amp because they're essentially the same exact thing. Like I said, let's go ahead and see what is inside the 45 amp. Remember guys, to be careful with your knives, always cut away from you while opening packages. Okay. Nice packaging, slides open like that. And inside the package, obviously, we have a ESC. Before we get to the ESC, let's talk about what else is in the package. Just like the 15 amp, it has 2 sets of stickers and a manual going over specs and programming. So, the Avian 45 amp ESC, unlike the 15 amp, but like all the others, does have that data wire, as you can see there, the little gray guy on the battery plug, that will transmit the battery's data to the ESC and likewise to your transmitter. The battery data that you will get from the ESC will include number of cycles on the pack, the temperature of the pack, the cell balance of the pack. It'll be able to tell your transmitter what the battery voltage is. Obviously, that's already kind of built into it, but it'll also tell you if the battery is fully charged or not. So it's always good to have a battery, to use a smart battery with a smart ESC, because when you plug it in, your ESC and your radio system will be able to know if the battery is fully charged or not. If you were to just plug in any other battery, it doesn't know what type of battery is plugged into it, so it can't really tell you that data accurately. On the other end, it does have 3.5mm bullet connectors for your motor, already soldered on there for you. And then on this end, obviously you have signal wire for your transmitter and your receiver, and it has no extra cables coming off of it. One thing that you guys might see, and it's hard to see it here, and I'll try to zoom in here, is right underneath the heat shrink on there is the plug for your speed control programmer box. So if you were to use the programmer box for this ESC, and like I said with the 15 amp ESC, we'll get more in depth into it with our next video that we're going to use for programming the ESCs. So there is a little port there. It's a 3-pin header right underneath the heat shrink. It's hard to see at this point. Maybe we'll get a close-up of how that plugs in. But like I said, go ahead and stay tuned for our next video. The 30 and the 45 amp ESCs both have a BEC output of 6 volts or 7.2 volts adjustable with a 7 amp continuous BEC current. They both weigh about 50 grams and they both come with an IC3 connector and the 3.5mm bullet connectors. And like I said earlier, they are both 3S to 6S compatible. All right, let's move on to the next ESC. A great ESC for your maybe higher end park flyer models, and that is the Avian 60 amp ESC. The Avian 60 amp ESC. All right, so this one's got a bit nicer of a box. Well, let's go ahead and open her up. This one I would use for maybe 4S to 6S, like lighter load 6S models. But I currently use it on a 4S glider and a couple 4S park flyer models. Great ESC. Packaging out of here. Let's get it cracked open. Okay. Oh, look at that box. That's pretty nice. I like that. Got the Smart logo inside of the box there. Spektrum on the box, and obviously the ESC. Nice heat sink on this ESC, which gives it the added current capabilities because it can dissipate heat a little bit better than the other ones. Go ahead and get these cables out of here. And just like the other ones, it comes with 2 sets of stickers, just like that, and a manual to help you understand how to use it. Let's go ahead and get rid of the packaging here. Okay, so here is the 60 amp Avian ESC. It is also 3S to 6S compatible, and it also has just one wire coming off of it for the signal right here. And it also has 3.5mm bullet connectors. And it also has the data wire for your battery. So if you're running a smart battery, you can get the data from that smart battery to your Spektrum compatible smart transmitter. Most transmitters nowadays will be able to give you all that good data. So you guys might be watching this and you might be wondering, well, what do I need smart for? So a smart ESC will transmit all the ESC telemetry, which includes current, RPM, the voltage of the pack, and that is with smart and dumb batteries alike, to your transmitter, among other things that you'll be able to monitor in real time. Really great stuff to be able to tune and get the best and most efficient setup out of your aircraft as possible. They're also high-resolution 32-bit ESCs that have a great throttle response and are calibrated for you out of the factory, but you can also calibrate them. Let's see. So just like with the 45 amp and the 30 amp, and this one's a bit easier to see, we'll get my little pokey tool here, is this 3-pin header here. That 3-pin header, just like with the 45 and the 30 amp, is the programming port for your Spektrum Smart ESC programmer. Also, the Spektrum 60 amp ESC has an 80 amp peak current. It has a 6 volt or 7.2 volt adjustable BEC, and 7 amps to 20 amps peak current BEC. It's about 56 grams. It comes with the 3.5mm connectors and the IC3 connector connected to it. And like you guys may already know, but I'll reiterate, these connectors are backward compatible with EC3 connectors, so that old blue connector that you used to have will plug straight into that. It is compatible with non-smart setups, so you don't have to have a smart receiver or smart ESC to run this ESC. It will work just fine as a normal ESC, but you will get the most benefits, the full smart benefits, if you're running a smart receiver or a smart receiver and a smart transmitter. So make sure you guys look into that. I'll go ahead and link that kind of stuff in the description below for you guys to learn more. So let's move on to the last two of the Avian ESCs, the 80 amp and the 100 amp. So here's the 100 amp, and unfortunately I don't have a 80 amp in a box because this is probably the most popular one because it is the only Spektrum Smart ESC that can handle 8S battery input. So whereas the 100 amp here can only handle 6S, so it's a 3 to 6S, and this is a 3 to 8S. So let's go ahead and unbox the 100 amp, and essentially everything that comes in the 100 amp is going to come with the 80 amp, except for one thing, and I'll show that to you guys here in a minute. You might see it on screen as well. So let's go ahead and unbox our 100 amp here. A knife, remember to cut away from you people. Don't want nobody hurt. Okay, pop that open. Oh, just like the 60 amp, we got the logos on the box like that. I like that a lot. And they'll come with, and this one is probably a pre-production fan. The fan will have the logo on there. That's a cool little touch that we have there. And it'll come with this fan as well. So this 80 amp comes with the little cooling fan. It is recommended to run it, but you don't have to. If you have it in a setup that's not quite pulling a whole bunch of amperage and getting it all hot and bothered, you won't have to use that. But I like to have it on there just for safety's sake and make it nice and cool. One great thing about, once again, is that the Avian ESCs will tell you the temperature of the ESC on your transmitter with a compatible setup, so you can monitor that kind of stuff. So if you do decide to not run the cooling fan on there, you will be alarmed if there is anything that is pulling too much current and causing the ESC to get a little too hot. On the 80 and the 100 amp ESCs, 80, 100 amp, there are IC5 connectors. So this is the bigger of the connectors. Like this is an IC3 and this is an IC5. See? So the IC5 is a higher current connector. And it also, like I said, has the data wire from the connector to the ESC. These ones have a bit bigger of a bullet connector on them. They are a 4mm bullet connector on these ESCs. One big difference between the 100 amp and the 80 amp, let me get my packaging out of the way here so you guys can have a better look, is that, like I said, it is 8S compatible, which means you can run two 4S packs in series to the ESC, straight to the ESC. So you have these two plugs, right? But that's not just it. If you're running two smart batteries, you'll get the data from those two batteries to your transmitter. So you have a battery 1 and a battery 2. It'll tell you the temperature of both packs. It'll tell you the fuel gauge of those two batteries and the cell balance of those two batteries, and if either battery is not fully charged when you plug it in. I think that's really cool. So it also, the 80 amp will come with a jumper, just like this one here, to where you can plug it into one of the leads like that and run just one battery. That makes it so if you just want to run 6S to it, or even 4S or whatnot to your 80 amp ESC, you have a jumper to make it so you can plug in just one battery and not have to worry about the other plug. If you leave this one unplugged, that's just going to make it so it doesn't work, because you have to connect these two poles. Hopefully that makes sense. Another thing about these two ESCs is that they both have two wires coming off of them. Well, actually 3 if you look at all 3 connectors. So why does it have 3 connectors, you may wonder? One of these connectors, likewise this one, just like all the other ones, is the connector that you go to the throttle signal on your receiver for the ESC's throttle signal, okay? The other connectors are for a redundant BEC connector. So if you're running a pretty high current servo setup, where you have 6 or more high torque, high current servos, it's a good idea to run 2 connectors from your ESC to your receiver. Like so. So if we had a 6-channel receiver like we have here, the AR6610T, and we had all the other ports filled up for servos, and they're all pretty high current draw servos, you'd want to plug in both connectors. So if I were to plug in this one, like I said, into our throttle port, which is the port number 1, we could plug in the other connector, and that's just this one with the orange and black wire on it for power and ground, into the bind port or another open port, like that. So that way you have 2 parallel connections of power going from your ESC's BEC to your receiver, so you don't have a whole bunch of current just going through one wire, and that can overload the port. I believe it's like 6 amps is what one of these ports can handle. You want to be able to put more than 6 amps through this connector, because each one of your servos could be pulling upwards of 2 to 3 amps each. So you want to be able to have a parallel connection. That is what those are for. And lastly, this little connector here, this little gray one, is simply a tachometer output, so you could, or input. So if you're using an external governor on your setup, like if it's a helicopter that needs an external governor off of the main headgear or something like that, you could use that. Some flight controllers you could use that with as well. One cool thing about the Spektrum Avian ESCs is that they have an electronic governor set up inside of them. And if you guys go ahead and watch one of my next videos where we talk about programming the Smart ESCs with the computer setup, you can see how that is set up. These ESCs are great for EDF planes or larger, I would say 60 to 90 size models that require up to 100 amps. This one, like I said, is 8S compatible. The 80 amp is 8S compatible, whereas the 100 amp is only 6S, and it has the one lead on it. And if you are to program your Spektrum Smart ESCs, your 100 amp ESCs, just like the other ones, there is a port on the side, but this one is actually occupied already. If you guys can see that, the fan is plugged in all the way to the port on the side where you would program it with. So if you wanted to program this ESC, you would have to unplug the fan port. And then that port, the 3-pin header in there, is for programming your ESC with the Spektrum Smart ESC programming box. And like I said, please follow along in our next couple of videos about programming the Smart ESCs with the programming box or with stick programming. Alright, so hopefully this video was helpful to you guys. This is Tom Cogswell from Horizon Hobby and SpektrumRC signing off on this Avian Smart ESC overview video. If you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Please make sure to like and subscribe this video if you liked this video, and subscribe if you want to be able to stay up to date with everything Smart, Spektrum, and Avian ESC related. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.